Ladies and gentlemen, this is Zach Moonshine with Metal Devastation Radio. Right now on the phone with me, I have Patrick Flannery from the band Saint Madness. What's going on, Patrick?
Hi, everybody. I actually go by the name Prophet with Saint Madness, but it's funny because when I signed up for Facebook, it wouldn't let me have a Prophet account. So I had to use my real name because I've always enjoyed just using Prophet, you know, and keeping my family and personal life separate from my band life. But good old Facebook wouldn't allow me to do that, so a lot of people know me by Patrick as well. So either one's fine.
All right. Well, Prophet, what's been going on in the world of Saint Madness?
A lot of interesting things. Like we don't have any shows booked at this time at all because we played quite a few shows over the last year and a half, and we figured, you know, we need to take off some time to write some new songs. But a couple cool things are happening, like our video for the song Drowning on Air is nominated for Best Video by the Los Angeles Music Awards. And a couple nights ago, we went to Hollywood to the Whiskey A Go-Go, and they had their nominations and voting party, which was pretty cool. The place was really packed, and met a lot of good people and so forth. And then we'll find out later if we win. And if we win, then we go back to the Los Angeles Music Awards on November 12th at the Avalon Theater in Hollywood to pick up the award. And that's one thing. And then the other thing is St. Madness started 21 years ago, so we've been around, you know, quite a long time. And the Tempe History Museum in Tempe, Arizona, is opening a brand new exhibit in November, actually 2 days after the Los Angeles Music Awards on November 14th. And the exhibit's called The Tempe Sound. And we're a Tempe band simply by the fact that we've rehearsed and recorded wrote all 9 of our albums in the same room in Tempe. So they asked us if we would submit memorabilia and stuff for the exhibit, which will be up for about a year. But we're going to be in the exhibit with people like the Jim Bossons and the Meat Puppets and Roger Clay and the Peacemakers and just a whole array of different styles of bands and artists, and we're pretty honored to be a part of it.
Dude, that's really cool, man. I was going to ask you how long you guys been jamming. You said 21 years?
Yeah, the band was founded in around March of 1993. I'm the only founding member left.
Exactly. How did the band get started?
Well, it was really funny because I had been in another band and I left that band, and so I was kind of searching. And I had put an ad in the New Times here, and a gentleman called me on the phone and said, you know, I don't really think we're ready for a vocalist, but I know who you are, and I saw that you're running an ad looking for a band, and we were wondering if you would come down and check us out. And I'm like, well, yeah. So I went down to where we rehearse actually now, and I met Van Pearson and Randall Mad Drums Garten, who Randy Garten ended up being our first drummer on our first record, and Steve was on four records. Anyway, I ended up joining their band, and as it happened, how it happened that we became Crown of Thorns was originally we were calling the band Bloody Murder, and I always thought that was a cool name, but like when we would say it to people, they weren't really responding to it, so we came up with Crown of Thorns, and we were known as Crown of Thorns from 1993 to August of 1997, when we found out there was a Christian rock group in New Jersey that had trademarked the name Crown of Thorns 2 years before we ever used it, so we knew we had to change our name. The album out at the time was called The Spiritual Visions of St. Madness, so I went to the band and I said, look, you know, our fans already know the name St. Madness because it's the name of our album. So why don't we switch to that? So we got an attorney and we did a search and we made sure that there wasn't any other St. Madnesses out there. And when we found out they didn't have it, we trademarked it and we own the name now. But basically how that band started was when we were called Bloody Murder, there were 2 guitar players and 1 drummer, and we didn't have a bass player yet. I went to the one guitar player and the drummer that I really liked, and I said, look, guys, you know, I enjoy jamming with you, but the other guy, excuse me, back then he used to bring a lot of beer and stuff to rehearsal, and he was more concerned with partying than he was being in a serious band. And the other thing is he had a tendency of playing out of tune a lot. And I think at the time he didn't know that he was out of tune, and he was one of these kind of guys that if you said something to him, he got like kind of butthurt about it. So I just said to the other two guys, I said, look, I enjoy jamming with you, but I can't work with this other person, so I need to go find something else. And they said, well, we want to stay and work with you. And I said, well, then we need to tell him that, and when he goes away, we'll just take over the room and we'll go on from there. And that's kind of what happened. And I felt bad because the other guy was a good songwriter, but, you know, music is a lot more than just writing songs. You know, it's a whole package, and there were certain parts of that package that he had no clue. And I just wasn't willing to start all over again with a person who really didn't know what they were doing and then have to relearn lessons that I had already learned for 15 years before I knew him.
Yeah. Well, that definitely makes sense, man.
Sorry, that was kind of a long story long, but that's what that is what happened.
Oh, that's cool. As far as what would you say is like some of your major influences that really got you into metal and what you do now?
Well, obviously, I think it started when I was young with bands like Alice Cooper. And I never really saw myself as a face paint kind of guy or theatrical when I was young. I knew I wanted to be a singer. My number one singer that I learned how to sing from was Elvis Presley. And I actually started singing in high school, putting on little Elvis shows, and they kind of did pretty good, and it changed my life because before that, all I wanted to do was play sports. I wanted to be a professional soccer player. But once I started singing Elvis, I instantly had more girlfriends and more friends, and all of a sudden everybody at school knew who I was, and it was a really cool experience because before that I was kind of a shy guy and had a few friends but didn't really have a ton of friends and whatnot. And so singing definitely changed my life. But then after doing the Elvis thing, what happened was one day a person called me Elvis one time too many, because before that, whenever someone would see me, they'd be like, hey, Elvis, what's up? But one day someone said that to me, and I thought, you know, I'm actually tired of being called Elvis, and if I want to stay in music, I need to write my own music, and I need to become known by my own reputation. And so from then on, I left doing Elvis music and started going straight into hard rock and then heavy metal. And back then, bands that really touched me were like Black Sabbath and old Judas Priest and stuff like that. And of course, later on when Metallica and Slayer and Exodus and all those bands came in, I went along with them because the heavier and the faster, the better for me back when I was younger. And, you know, now, of course, bands like Pantera, you know, are huge influences on me. Motorhead, Lemmy, Iron Maiden. It's mostly old school stuff, and that's just because I'm an older guy. And, you know, I appreciate bands like Armada Moth and Morbid Angel and things like that, and Death. And we've played with many death metal bands and black metal bands, but we're a bit more old school and have more melody, I think, in the vocals. And I try to write stuff that people can understand so they know what I'm singing. So hopefully it makes them want to sing along.
Yeah, it fucking kicks ass, man.
It's all about being an entertainer. When I was in my early 20s, I wanted to be a rock star, and to me, a rock star was someone who was making some money and getting a lot of chicks, and they're up on stage, and they can, you know, pretty much do what they want, and, you know, have a lot of friends, everybody loves them, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I didn't realize what the real music business was until I had been around for a lot of years. And the music business side of it, it can be pretty ugly, and it's a hardcore business. I mean, you can end up paying dues for the rest of your life and still never make money. But at the end of the day, looking back now, I do it because I love being an entertainer, and our job is when people come to our shows is to do our best to make sure that they have a good time. And it's not about money, because when you have money or you don't have money, doesn't make any difference on whether you're a happy person. Money can make it so that you can pay your bills, but if you're an unhappy person inside, money is definitely not going to make you happy. In fact, money can create more problems. But I knew when I was 16 years old, I knew that I wanted to make music, and that's what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And so, like I said, now in St. Madness, we look at it as we're honored that we get to get up on stage and entertain people. We never look like we take it for granted, or when good things come our way, we don't take it for granted. We've worked extremely hard for every little club that we've ever got, and we're definitely grateful.
It's badass, man. As far as the local scene there, what can you tell people out there that don't know what it's like there in Phoenix and Tempe, Arizona?
I think the Arizona metal scene, as far as talented bands and people, is absolutely kick-ass. I mean, there are so many great bands here and great artists. And when I say great, I mean people that really throw it down, and bands that work their asses off to be good. And there's tons of them here, so if you come to Arizona and you want to become an A-list band in the Arizona metal scene, you're going to have to work for it, because there's just way too many kick-ass people out there. The problem that we have now, Zach, is that so many venues are going away. The bad economy, or whatever we want to blame it on. I think it all started when they started telling people they couldn't smoke in bars anymore, and and of course the DUI laws are so strict, and sometimes cops wait outside the venues for you to leave. And I understand all that. I'm just saying that it had a profound effect on the nightlife in general. And so what you have now is you have a lot of metal clubs that suddenly are booking some hip-hop shows on off nights, and the hip-hop guys aren't really doing that much better, because it seems like live entertainment and even going out to dance clubs and stuff is starting to fade off, And when it fades off, venues close. When venues don't make money, they can't pay their staff and they can't pay their rent. So they disappear. And that's what we've been experiencing here, is too many of the good clubs have gone by the wayside. But there's still a handful of really good ones left. And I think I would put up the Arizona metal scene against any metal scene anywhere, because I believe it's that strong.
Hell yeah, man. There's definitely a lot of good bands coming out there. I know we play quite a few.
Yeah, and what's cool is the variety of music,
Yeah, all different kinds.
All different kinds, and there's some great country bands here as well, and so Phoenix is kind of like an offshoot of LA, in the sense that, because we're only 6 hours away from LA. But people come here from all over the world, and so you have a huge influence that comes here from, many different parts of the world, and it's kind of cool because it reflects in the music. And there's just, like I said, I get amazed. It's gone through phases. Like, there's been phases here where I'll go out to a bunch of shows and I won't really hear anything that makes me think about them on the drive home. Like, wow, that band was really amazing. But in the last 5 to 10 years, I would say something happened here, because the bands are 10 times better than they used to be, I think. And these are all just my opinions, and I recognize that. But I take the time to go out and really look at what's out there and analyze the bands when I watch them. And when I go to a show, I look at what kind of equipment they're playing. I look at how they're dressed. I look at how they interact with an audience. A lot of bands will get up there and look at their shoes all night. And as a fan, when I go to a concert, I don't really want to pay money to watch someone look at their shoes. I want someone to want to entertain me. And again, I'm old school, Zach, and I recognize that. I'm an older guy, so back in the day, all our bands focused on being good entertainers and singing to the audience, not to the floor. But again, you know, I'm not saying I don't think we're better than anybody else, because I really don't. We just are what we are. And we're, you know, older people that work really hard to be the best that we can be. But I think the scene here is great. And, you know, you play Pelvic Meatloaf, and do you play Sectus?
No, I haven't had a chance to get with those guys yet.
Yeah, they're really cool. There's another band called She Murdered Me, Sick Monic. I mean, really, Warhead. There's just tons and tons of really good bands here. And what I love about that is when we play shows with these bands, it makes us stay on our toes. You know, it makes us work hard. It wouldn't be any fun if whenever we went on stage, we were automatically the best band of the night. So, you know, I love playing with bands where I'm worried to follow them. That's when I actually do my best. It drives the adrenaline. And there's plenty of bands here that when we play with them, I'm like, okay, we really need to bring our A game, you know. And, of course, Sacred Reich and Flotsam and Jetsam came out of here. So that gives you an idea of the caliber of bands that come out of here.
Hell yeah, man. Speaking of shows and concerts and whatnot, what would you say, looking back, what would you say is like some of the craziest shit that you've ever seen at a show, either your own or somebody else?
Well, I went to Cal Jam 2 in 1978, and it was at the Ontario Motor Speedway in California. It was about 250,000 people. And that was my first experience of watching people shit in public and shoot up and fuck. And because I was like, I hitchhiked to the concert. I wanted to go so bad. I went by myself, and it was like Aerosmith was there, and Black Oak Arkansas, and Heart, and Santana, and Bob Welch, Aerosmith. I'm just trying to remember Dave Mason. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I wanted to go so bad I hitchhiked. Luckily, when I got there, because I was actually scared. I had no idea that there was going to be this many people in one place. You know, I had gone to arenas before where it was 10,000 people, but this was 250,000, so I was a bit nervous. Anyway, luckily, in the crowd, I found 5 people I knew from my school. So they let me hang out with them, and after it was all over, they gave me a ride home. So luckily, I didn't have to ride home. But I was standing in line to the shitter, the porta potties, whatever you want to call them. And all of a sudden, I hear this water running, and I turn around, and this biker lady next to me was standing there with her old man. I guess she couldn't wait no more, so she pulled her shorts off, and she was literally squatting next to my foot. And I had to move out of the way, and her old man was just like laughing his ass off, you know. But I saw people shooting up and pretty much anything that you could think of, you know, besides fighting and people running around naked. And it was cool, because back in the day, Zach, you could go to a concert like that, and a chick could walk through the sea of humanity naked, and you would have guys that would whistle, and they'd howl and all that. But they wouldn't grope her, and they wouldn't assault her. Nowadays, a girl goes to a concert, and she's just standing there with her old man, and people are reaching in and groping her. I see it all the time at the bigger concerts, and it really makes me mad, because people, you know, I'm an entertainer, and if I was the bands on stage, I'd be pissed off, because it makes it so that some of these ladies don't even want to go back to a concert anymore, because people can't keep their hands to themselves. I also went to the US Festival in 1983, which started, here's the lineup, okay? It was Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, Ozzy Osbourne, Judas Priest, Triumph, Scorpions, and Van Halen at Glen Helen Park in San Bernardino. And that had 300,000 people at it. And I think there were 2 murders that day and all these drug busts, and people were being smashed up against the barrier in the front of the stage. And we got really close when Ozzy and Motley Crue were on. And I was literally like right in front of Jakey Lee. And that was a great experience, because nobody in the audience knew who Ozzy's guitar player was going to be. And out came Jakey Lee, and man, that guy was amazing. But we were watching people pass out and get smashed against the barrier up front and having to be taken out, to the medics. But on the good side of that is I had the most fun of my life at the US Festival. I can't explain it. Maybe because I was a little bit older. I was probably 4 or 5 years older than when I went to Cal Jam 2. So, I had already been to Cal Jam 2, so I knew a bit of what to expect. But I had an amazing time at the US Festival. And what was really cool later was when I was flipping through, I think it was the LA Times or whatever, I need to go look, but somebody took a picture from the stage of the audience, and I'm in it. And so I kept it, and it's in my scrapbook.
That's badass, man.
I still have a T-shirt. I still have a T-shirt from that show, and it was Memorial Day weekend of 1983.
I've watched that show on I've got a video of it that I got a while back.
Yeah.
Can't remember where I found it, but yeah, I've watched that video a bunch of times with the it's got Motley Crue and Ozzy and
yeah. Judas Priest, Scorpions. Scorpions to me and probably Priest were the two best bands of the whole day. Triumph was amazing, but they were kind of misplaced in that lineup. They were almost too clean.
That was the first time Motley Crue had played Shout at the Devil live too, I believe.
Yeah, and they only had their Too Fast for Love self-produced album out at the time. They had basically just got signed. This was like their first major show. They went from playing the clubs in LA to suddenly playing in front of 300,000 people. And because of that show, from what I've read, that's when Sharon and Ozzy approached them about having them go on tour with them, which they did on the Shout at the Devil tour.
It was all over with after that.
Yeah, man, I was so glad I got to be there. Now, a really cool piece of information was why that concert was going on, which was pretty much the height of the glam, or it was the beginning of the glam explosion, okay, of glam metal. Well, why that concert was happening, Metallica was recording Kill 'Em All at that same time. So you could see, nobody knew at the time, but the change was already in the works to go heavier and faster. It was already being done, and it was already started with Metallica and, of course, the bands up in San Francisco. But I can remember thinking in the early to mid-'80s that glam, metal, rock and roll is going to be around forever just because it was so hugely popular worldwide. It was like you couldn't picture it dying off, And for me what happened was glam, rock and roll, metal is basically, and I've heard Lemon say this too, and I agree, it was a natural progression to go from 50s rock and roll bands, which is where people started being rebellious, and then in the 60s they added a little bit of distortion and they got a little heavier, and in the 70s it was still that basically a lot of it was 3-chord rock and roll or whatever. It started to get more technical and a little more distortion in the 70s. So when the 80s came around, if you listen to like 80s metal, Poison or these bands that were big at that time, and if you took a bit of the distortion out of the music, you would see that it's not that far from some of the 50s style stuff. Of course, 50s was all 3 chords, but you can hear that it's basically just rock and roll. But when you added the distortion and the volumes and the heavier hitting drums and the bigger drum sets, it sounds different, but it was a natural progression. When the 1990s came along, that generation that went for the grunge, for the first time, they wanted to focus on being more like the 1970s. Everything before that, the 50s kids wanted to get away from the big band era because that was their parents' stuff. The 60s kids wanted to get away from the 50s because that was their parents. The 70s kids wanted to get away from the 60s because that was their parents, the hippies and whatnot. The 80s kids wanted to get away from the 70s because, that's why in the 80s everybody went to rock and roll metal became more Las Vegas. Everybody had flashier clothes, and they had bigger hair, and they had all this. They wanted to get away from the 70s, which seemed dreary. Everybody had straight hair. They wore jeans, T-shirts, whatever. So the 80s wanted to make a bigger statement than the 70s. Then the 90s came, and instead of wanting to become something totally brand new, like all the other eras before that had done, they focused on trying to sound more like the 70s and look more like the 70s. And I think ever since then, things have been kind of like up in the air, in a way, And I know Screamo came in and emo and all that Justin Bieber shit and whatever, but it just seems like, as far as hard rock and metal was, it was on a really good path. And then all of a sudden, the 90s came around, and it's just kind of, I don't know, it kind of went weird. Now, on one hand, I could be grateful for that, because if it wasn't for the alternative music becoming big, a lot of these death metal and black metal bands might not even exist. But the metal part of it, since we were being squashed in America by alternative, I think it made metal artists more angry and meaner, so the music got more angry and meaner. And maybe, in a way, we have to thank the alternative movement for that.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, like bands like Pantera and Sepultura and stuff like that really definitely thrived during the 90s.
Yeah, and they were the few, They were the few. I mean, in America, Pantera and Ozfest, and I would definitely add Sepultura in there, they thrived at a time when metal was dying. And thank God for it, because I knew lots of guys around here that were in metal bands. One day everybody's saying long live metal, and 2 weeks later they're wearing plaid and they're trying to look alternative and they're changing their music. And that disgusted me. Yeah. And I used to say to Marge at some point in the mid-90s, I'm like, well, at least we have Metallica still, because metal's dying, but at least we have Metallica. And then I saw Metallica, do their change. Right. And I was so pissed off. This is why St. Madness wears face paint, because Arizona used to be a mecca of metal in the 80s. Bands came here from all over to play in the Arizona metal scene. Then in the 90s, it all but died. And there were still some metal bands around, but it wasn't nothing like it was. So because alternative music was making fun of metal and putting it down, I said to Marge one day, next show, I'm going to wear face paint, and I want us to start writing heavier, darker music. I want to be more metal. I want to be more dark. I want to stick out like a sore thumb. And that's what we did. We changed our whole look. And it was really funny, because once we added a show with blood and fire and face paint and all this stuff, we ended up taking off. And it was another one of those cases where our band actually flourished during the 90s, when most metal bands around here didn't.
Yeah, that's pretty cool that it worked out that way.
Well, here's what's funny, Zach. When the museum exhibit opens, it's a mix of bands, but it's also primarily alternative bands, because Tempe, Arizona, was known for the grunge alternative, along with Seattle. A lot of alternative bands came through here and played here. And so alternative music got really big here during the 90s. So what's funny is Old St. Madness is going to be in this exhibit right in the middle of all the alternative guys as well. And in a way, I was doing an interview not long ago, I have to thank them for it. Because if they wouldn't have made fun of metal, and if they wouldn't have gone and, gone the way that they did, I probably would have never said, let's wear face paint. We would have just stayed the way we were. And maybe we wouldn't have had as much fun.
Yeah. No doubt. Well, one thing I definitely wanted to ask you about, last year you sent me the CD for Carney Metal. It's fucking awesome Greatest Hits album. It's Greatest Hits Volume 2, actually. But there's a shit ton of great tunes on this, and it's still in my car.
Cool.
It's been stuck in there for over a year now. And
that's awesome. That's really awesome.
There's a lot of good songs on there. There's some that definitely stick out that I wanted to ask you about. One in particular is the first song that I ever heard by you guys, Arizona. I remember I had just moved back out to Phoenix back in 2006 or 7. I was driving through the city one night, was fucking stoned, and I was listening to KUPD, and they were playing that song, and I'd never heard it before, and I was like, what the fuck is this, man? I cranked it up, I was listening to it, I was like, this is fucking badass. So I immediately pulled over, because I knew that the DJ might not get on right away and say what it was, so I wanted to be able to park somewhere so I could write down what he was going to say so I wouldn't forget it. And sure enough, after a couple songs, he came on and he said St. Madness, Arizona. So I wrote that down, went home, looked it up on MySpace, and found you guys. And pretty much been a fan of you ever since. But I wanted to ask you, that song, how did you guys, what's the story behind that?
Yeah, it's kind of cool because, again, you know, I'm a California native. I was born in Glendale by Los Angeles. And when I was a kid, my family constantly moved, and we lived all over California, 2 islands in Hawaii. We lived in Holland in Europe, and we lived in Kansas and Missouri. And so we moved here in 1986. And before that, I used to be jealous of people who would say, hey, you see that guy over there? I've known him since I was in grade school. You know, I've known him 10 years, 20 years. I never knew anybody more than 1 to 3 years. So when I moved here and I realized I liked it, I said to myself, I need to stay here. I need to have a place that I have roots. Well, I'm kind of ashamed to say this, but it's okay. Before I moved to Arizona, I didn't know very much about Native American people. I only knew what I saw on TV. And sometimes what I saw on TV I didn't like. And because they would portray them often as drunks and whatnot. So once I moved to Arizona, I have a great number of Native American friends. And I've grown to have such a love for them and their people. And I feel I'm one of these people that I do feel that American people owe the Native Americans something. I'm just I know there's a difference of opinion out there, but my personal opinion is it's right to try to help them and to try to do good things for them. And all the people I've met and known that are Native American, I love them to death. And so since I'm not from Arizona, it kind of struck me weird that no metal band around here had ever written a song that I knew of in tribute to Arizona. And so, the way it worked out is I just said to our guitar player at the time, I'm like, look, there's no real metal song for Arizona here that I know of, and we need to write one. And it was like the very next rehearsal, this is Christian Satan. Christian Satan's a guitar player, one of them on the whole Vampires in the Church album, and he's all by himself on the Satanic album. That's all Christian Satan. And he's a phenomenal guitar player. And he's very young. So it was almost like having one of my kids in the band. When he joined us, he was 18, and that was in 2004. So I was already 32, something like that. I don't know, 33, whatever. I was old. And he showed up the next rehearsal with the music, just like that. And I thought, okay, I know I want to write about how much I love the state of Arizona, but I also love the Native American community. So how do I combine the two and make it a tribute song to them? Because Arizona, now my mom and stepdad have passed away, but they owned a restaurant here in the Scottsdale airport from 1987 to 2000. And the people of Arizona have been very good to me and my family. And the people in the metal scene in Arizona have been extremely good to me in St. Madness. And we feel, and I feel, that it's only right and just that we write a song in tribute. And I only care that people enjoy it. I don't care if that song never makes $1, because it ain't about the money. I wanted to make a statement to say, look, I'm a California guy, and you guys took me in, and you took my family in, and you were welcoming to us, and you support my band. And since I've been in Arizona, I've had 2 sons, and I think I'm the luckiest guy in the world. And I'm not with either of their moms anymore, but I have 2 boys, you know, that I'm very proud of. And Marge started managing St. Madness in 1995, and now Marge and I are together, and we've lived together for 19 years. And Marge is born and raised in Arizona, so this is her home for sure since birth. And Arizona's just been so good to me. I never get tired of singing that song, and people have asked me because it's probably our #1 requested song. I would say Arizona and MDB. And anyway, I one day I realized I needed to write a song for March because I had written one before, but it was kind of sarcastic, and it wasn't a St. Madness song. It was in a different project. And I just thought, you know, I need to write her a song. So we wrote AZ Woman, and I wrote the lyrics about Margie, you know. And it was my way to say, hey, I love you, Marge, you know. And I still love Arizona, so we have actually 2 Arizona songs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another badass song. There's another one on the album that really, really sticks out. It's probably one of my favorites, Ever After.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that one?
Well, to make a long story extremely short, I never used to talk about this in the press or in interviews and so forth, but I'm okay now because it's kind of out there. So I was born with a really rare blood disease. It's called Bruton's disease, which is Brutons, and the long term is congenital hypogammaglobulinemia, which is the same thing basically as the boy in the plastic bubble. And he was born with no immune system, so he had to be in a contained environment or he'd get sick and probably die. Half of my immune system works, half of it doesn't. So growing up, I was constantly sick. And when I was growing up, and it's actually a familial disease, it's a family disease, where the females in the family carry it, and they give it to the males. The males can't give it to anybody, but they get it. So my mom's brother, my uncle, he got it. And in 1969, he died when he was 21 because he kept getting pneumonia over and over, and he died. And when I was young, doctors were telling my parents, you know, he's got Bruton's, and you need to understand that he's probably never going to be a teenager. So my parents, every time I got sick, they were worried, and this ties into why Ever After was written. So my eldest son, Joshua, who's now 25, he's seen me go through some really bad bouts where I was in the hospital and I was very sick. And he's always been so worried about me dying. So I wrote him the song Ever After as a way to say, look, if I leave this world before you, you need to know that I'll never leave you, ever. I'll be with you and I'll watch over you, and I'll wait for you until later we can be together. But your dad's never going to leave you until we can be together in the Ever After. And that's what that's about.
That shit is fucking deep, man. First time I listened to it, I could definitely tell that there was something, it was obviously, you know, it's definitely one of those songs that definitely had some kind of deep story going behind it.
Yeah, I mean, that's 5 months after we recorded it, I was diagnosed with cancer, and that put a scare into everybody. Because here we just did the song, and then lo and behold, I'm diagnosed with cancer. But luckily, they cured it, and I'm okay now.
Hell yeah, man. Well, another one of my favorites on there is Death Drives a Buick.
Yeah.
I love the lyrics to that, man. What can you tell us about that?
That was based on a true story, too. Briefly, we had a guy in the band named Mud, and Mud, he was a bass player, and Mud used to wear like the black robe, if you will, with a hood, and he painted his face white. And he was driving home after a show one night, and he stopped at a Circle K. He was running out of gas. And, you know, you got to understand, this is like April or May. This isn't anywhere near Halloween. So he gets out of his vehicle, which was a Buick, and he goes in there to pay, you know, $20 on pump number 4. And everybody's looking at him, so he's feeling a bit self-conscious. So he walks out to the car and he starts pumping gas, and he sees people looking at him. So he pulls his black hood over his head. So he's standing there in this black robe with a black hood pumping gas. And a carload of teenagers drove by, and they screamed out the window, "Look, Death drives a Buick," because he actually had a Buick Regal from 1989. So when he told that story, I'm like, dude, we gotta write a song about that. So that's where that came from. Same thing with the song Carl the Clown. That was a true story based on when Margie used to live in Minnesota. One day she was walking to work with another lady, and they both got assaulted by a homeless guy who was covered in shit, basically. And he ended up beating the tar out of the other lady. Marge got away. But the cops came and took him away, you know, but he was covered in shit from head to foot. So I just, you know, I hear crazy things and I go, okay, I'm going to write a song about that. I write the lyrics for Saint Madness, so you can blame me for any of them, you know.
That's kick-ass, man.
It's a lot of fun.
As far as what kind of plans do you guys have for the future moving forward now?
Well, we are starting to write songs for the next record, and we begin recording in January, but I'm in no rush because since 2009, we've put out 3 Saint Madness records, and I put out 1 solo record in 5 years. So we put out 4 CDs. So I want to wait like 3 years before I put out another one. 3 years, so 2016 or 17 is when I want to complete the next record and have it out. I do kick around the idea of retiring, and it's mostly a health issue, Zach, than it is. It's not about my love for metal or music, because I love metal and I love music as much as I ever have. But as I get older, they found I have a bone spur in my neck from 35 years of headbanging, and I have 3 bone spurs in my spine. And so, believe it or not, just going to rehearsal because we're a loud band even at rehearsal. We play on Mesa Boogies and Ampeg bass, and anyway, it's incredibly loud. And loud music now goes right through me. It goes like right in my spine and actually causes me pain. But, you know, I still give it all I've got, and I, you know, just put the pain out of my head. But sometimes it gets really, really bad. And I'm just basically giving it my all for as long as I can. And hopefully, you know, I can just keep going. And if not, then we'll record 1 more album, and maybe on the 25th anniversary, which would be 2018, maybe we'd have a big show and bring back some old members and then retire the band, you know, the next day, which I'm thinking about. But it really just all depends on my health, because everybody in the band's having a great time. Everybody's getting along really good, and we're having fun, and, you know, we're really having a good time right now. So I really don't want to see it go away. It's really just going to come down to my health.
Well, we hope to we definitely hope to hear more music from you guys, but I know no matter what, man, we're gonna keep playing the fucking tunes that you gave us.
And I can give you more, man. You know, if you want more, just let me know. You know, send me another address where to send, and I'll send you, you know, a T-shirt or a CD or whatever.
Yeah, hell yeah, dude.
Just send me like an email and tell me what size you like. Do you have one of my shirts?
No, I don't.
Well, tell me what size you wear, and again, just give me the address again, and I'll throw, because we have 9 records out, so if you want a different record, just let me know, and I'll send it to you.
That'd be sweet, dude. I'll definitely email you after we get off the phone here.
I'm happy to do it, man. You know, you're out there. If it wasn't for people like you, I mean, all of us work together to keep metal strong, and we're honored by the fact that you like our music enough to want to play it.
Oh yeah, dude. Well, Prophet, I guess I'm about out of questions for you, man. Is there anything else that you want to add to let the people out there know?
Yeah, long live the fans of metal music. Just, you know, I know it's one thing to say to your friends that are in a band, hey man, I came to your show, and that's great, but try to pay to get in and buy a CD. I know people don't want to buy CDs, and if you can't buy a CD, buy a shirt, buy a hat. The only way that these bands can keep existing is if they make a little bit of money. And, it's even more than just going to the show sometimes. Because a lot of bands bust their ass and they make next to nothing. And if we want to keep metal music out there, we all have to put our money where our mouth is. So,
amen to that.
Just keep that in your minds. When you go out to see your favorite band, even though they say, hey man, I'll let you in free, say, no man, you know what? I want to pay to get in because I love your band that much and you deserve to make a few dollars.
Well, Prophet, before I let you go, I got to get you to make a station tag, cool?
Okay.
All right, man. Just say something like, this is Prophet from St. Madness, and you were listening to Metal Devastation Radio.
All right. And I'll throw my own little spin on it, too, right?
Hell yeah, dude.
All right. Tell me when.
Whenever you're ready.
This is Prophet from the band St. Madness, and you're listening to Metal Devastation Radio. That's right, metal to the death and beyond.
That's fucking awesome, dude. Hell yeah.